Well, I think we want to take a little time, especially since you're trained as an accountant, to address the perennial topic of taxes and ownership and how this all comes about if you are a foreigner and you come to live in this country. So one thing I will say is that in this country, here, you may buy fee simple. The title is in your name. This is different than the beach and the land borders where you must have a trust to own your property. And I think that's been one thing that's really made San Miguel popular over the last 20 years is that they can, and people feel so much more comfortable owning fee simple.
Yes, indeed. And yes, because my training as an accountant in taxes, I've been dealing that for almost 20 years on that regard. But let's start on this idea, and I really want you to feel it. Whatever you are buying today, you are going to sell it at some point in the future. So you have to plan very well your purchase. So let's start with the time when you are selling your property as a foreigner. Nowadays, the tax law, it's very specific. We don't know what will happen in 5 years, in 10 years. We don't know that. But you can be prepared since now as if you were selling the property today. And the ideal is to have a good counselor, not just a person to show your property, because all of us can do that, but counseling on the best strategy on your property. For example, you remember that as a foreigner, when you buy a property in Mexico, you must require the permit from the Mexican government to have property in your name.
Yeah.
And basically that permit tells you that for anything related to that little piece of land of Mexico, you will abide by the Mexican laws. One of those is taxes. All of us love taxes. And we have, as in many countries, different levels: federal, state, and local taxes. So let's go related on the seller's taxes. And one question that I get all the time is, let me bring my lawyer. Well, our law has, as in many places, in many countries, different levels of law. A real estate tax lawyer can help you, but our due diligence to help you as counselors, as real estate agents, is to give you the basic preliminary work as if you were going to sell your property today. And that's my service as an accountant, that I present the scenario as if you were selling with your current status, analyzing your status in Mexico, your property documents as well, how they are set up in order to present, first of all, a first scenario according to the market, analyzing the market on the price value of your property. And then with that, figured out taxes. What federal taxes you will be incurring, what local taxes can you or need to pay, like the property tax, to have it current, up to date. And those ones are in Mexico. Each municipality has their own property tax value percentage. So in some municipality can be very high and others can be very low. San Miguel has been a very low property tax through the years. And there are many benefits, like a 15% discount at the beginning of the year. So for example, if you are selling your property and you paid at the beginning of the year your property tax, the difference when you close the property, you can have it prorated, and you can have also the benefit transfer over to the buyer, that they don't have to worry for the rest of the year for the property tax. And there is another one. Every time you buy a property in San Miguel or in any municipality in Mexico, you pay the acquisition tax. Let's think that you bought your property 2 years ago and you are selling it today. You can transfer the acquisition tax that you pay to the municipality at that time over to your new buyer. So that's also a benefit on the property. Analyzing that part can be a tremendous bonus over for a buyer and making it more appealing for a purchase.
Yes, and it's also shocking how many agents don't know that. And in many cases, they leave thousands of dollars on the table
Oh, yeah.
without pointing this out and filing the necessary paperwork. So let me ask you a couple of things that I think people would ask if buyers were here. The first thing is the SRE, which is the permit that where the government allows you as a foreigner to buy property, is never turned down. That is completely road. I mean, if it was Putin or something, they might hold it up. But as far as we know, no one has ever turned it down. It's really more of a way for the government to keep track of who owns what, rather than the government saying, okay, Ben can buy or not buy.
Yes.
So you always get it.
You always-
It can take, lately, anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks. Though usually it's more along 2 or 3. So that's one thing. And then you're describing the property taxes, which are very low. I have never seen a house with a property tax over $1,000 US. You probably have.
Some of them I have seen, but very few. But we are talking $1,000 a year.
Yes.
I mean, because it's incredible how the taxes, even in the golf courses, for example, property taxes are a tenth of what you will be paying maybe in California
Yes.
or in Texas, in
Yes.
some other areas. So yes, indeed, in San Miguel de Allende, property taxes is something that you don't need to be concerned.
Okay.
Because so far, they are very low.
And the acquisition tax is typically 4%.
There is a scale on the acquisition tax, but yes, 4% is in general the percentage for the acquisition tax. And for example, to our buyers, what I tell them, aside from the value of the property, I always suggest to add a 5.5% additional for closing cost.
Sure.
That if there is a decrease on what you need to pay, always you will have that reimbursed, because we have the tools to help you also on that. For example, the escrow service in San Miguel, all of us use it, I will say, every day. So that gives you a guarantee on your money, and it can be reimbursed any difference that you have. But also, if you have a difference, when you open a Mexican bank account, that it's easy as well. It's so easy. That will help you to set up on your expenses at the beginning.
Yes.
For example, the utilities. Somebody said, I don't want to have my water and electrical service cancel and make a new contract. Now, there is a procedure as well that we can follow up in order to transfer the names of those services into yours once you bought the property.
Yes, and that's a typical service that we provide
Oh, yes.
to buyers, because many buyers would be intimidated to walk into Sapasma and try to do that.
Yes, that's our post-sale service that we really are proud to offering it to you, and all the documentation necessary. Actually, I have helped many of our clients also to open their Mexican bank account. Very simple, very easy, even with their tourist visa. So there are banks and there are banks. So also that's
Yeah.
part of our service.
Yeah, so I will say, if you're planning to live in this country, if you can learn to make your signature consistent,
Oh, yes.
many doors will be open to you, because this is a unique fetish of this country. And if your signature doesn't match the one on your documents, you'll have to sit there and do it over and over again until it does.
Yes, remember that we have in general in Mexico the Spanish law school, let's say. And indeed, the signature, it's so important that every time you go for any official transaction, you must have your passport, your residence card if you have it, a utility bill, always very important.
Yes, yes, and there are, and addressing the issue of title, there are in this country, as there is in the United States, many ways of taking title, and it's more important in Mexico to discuss those, because any change of name on the title will cost you quite a bit of money. So some years ago, I sold a house to a couple. One of them is 31 years older than the other one. I said, you know, what you might want to do is put this in the name of the younger one, give yourself a lifetime usufruct. We assume you will pass before your partner, and you will have no documentation, no anything to do, no taxes to pay. And of course, they didn't listen to me on that, and now they're wanting to change some names, and they're stunned that it's $12,000 or $15,000 to do that.
Exactly, and when we are checking that you want to sell your property, and we're checking the status, the names that appear in the title, indeed, it's very common, for example, in the Anglo families, that the wife changed her last name to the husband's last name.
Yes.
So that creates another identity, and for the Mexican law, it's a different personality. So there has to be a track of why the name changed. So a good real estate professional advisor will see on those details, and if a step is needed to do or more documents need to be gathered, definitely we will go over that in order to prepare the documents. If there is a legal office that we need to attend in order to straighten a name, a comma, a dot, something, it's our duty to know and see that documentation and prepare the strategy. For example, I know that it's not very common when we think about a condominium, that we think it's a gated community, but there are properties that it's a single building, there is one property below, one property above. And just because they are sharing some common elements, in our Mexican law, there is a condominium. It's not co-ownership, it's different. So when we are looking into the titles and we see those mentioning those names or those figures, we need to really search and know all the details. Wills, exactly, testaments. Take advantage. September in general in Guanajuato, in San Miguel, we have the month of the testament, 2 for 1. And having your will prepared in Mexico definitely helps you a lot. So that's another advice that I always tell them.
Yes, we do not, essentially there's a substantial congruence with all the ways of holding property with which you would be aware of if you lived in the United States or Canada. But the one thing that does not exist is joint ownership with the right of survivorship. So regardless of your situation, if you and your wife or your partner or your children or your brothers and sisters buy a house, you need a will to discuss where the interest of those individual people will go, because it is not automatically embedded in the title.
Exactly, and as I mentioned, either if we are working with a buyer, we can counsel on how to set up that in the title, the procedure. If we are working with a seller, looking at all the documents indeed help us to have the best strategy on selling the property, but also helping the buyer, because what we want to have is, number one, the legal documents of the property of the seller to be ready for the moment that a buyer comes into this scene and presents an offer. We are not delayed in fixing things, but making a decision, a counteroffer, a negotiation, something that you can close the sooner the better with a proper due diligence.
Yes.
So that's our obligation. So some people ask me, can I have my seller's lawyer into this scene? Yes, you can have it, but it's our obligation because we are committed, because our state license, to know all those aspects. So you can have it, but we have the knowledge to help you in that stage. Can I have as a buyer, have my lawyer to review all the contracts? Yes, indeed. Remember that you as a buyer are paying the closing cost, and in the closing cost there is the notary service fee. And the notary, in our legal system, it's a lawyer with a higher degree appointed by the state. Not just anyone can be a notary. And that's something very important that also you should look at. All real estate transactions have to be done before a notary. So, working with a notary, you can have your buyer lawyer into the scene, looking at the documents, at the contracts, at everything, but also we as representatives, as agents, real estate advisors, are involved with the notary and do the same due diligence in helping you. So it's not that you are saving, it's that when you are hiring, either for buying or selling a property, the first question is, do you have your state license in Guanajuato? Are you certified? What are your knowledges on real estate transactions? Who is your supporter as a broker, as legal advisor into your firm? And that's where we are proud of offering that service.
Yes. And in the U.S., I don't really know about Canada, but in the U.S., a notary is, first of all, given to any attorney who passes the bar, and secondly, can be acquired by taking a very, very minor test. So what you often find is the notary is the secretary or personal assistant at the bank or brokerage, and all they're really doing is saying, yes, that's your signature. Well, a notary in this country is a much different situation, has had several years of education beyond that of an attorney, has been chosen by the governor and other people at the state level, and each town has a certain number of allocated notaries. So we have a few here that we really like, and we have some that are better choices for certain things than others. But the notary really has public faith as if he or she is an arm of the government, which is completely different from a notary in the United States. So you can bring your own attorney as a buyer or a seller to the transaction. I've done that personally as a principal, and I've also encouraged it with people who've had some concerns about one issue or the other. But the reality is we have really excellent notaries. They do a lot of business. They face a lot of complexities because there are things going back in the history of San Miguel, of somebody died in 1928 and nobody has probated his or her estate since then. And so we have a lot of people who are expert at fixing all of these things. So you really do not need to have an attorney on either end, especially if your agent is capable of discussing the tax implications and other issues and pointing out the areas where we want to say, Mr. Notary, take a look at these three things to make a perfect transaction.
Oh, exactly. And there are so many things involved in that. So having a good real estate counselor, not just an agent, but a counselor, a realtor, a broker that really is up to date on taxes, on market, on law, many aspects, it's very important for your advisor. And guess what? As a buyer, you don't pay the agent. So, much better to have a professional real estate agent on your side.
Yes, exactly. So what else, what other questions do you find that foreigners often ask you?
Oh, well, one of the main ones is, do I need to bring a suitcase full of bills to buy property in Mexico? Not
You mean
really.
as in cash?
Like in cash?
Efectivo?
Efectivo, bills, and all that. Now, for example, the usage of escrow services in San Miguel. I'm proud to say that aside from the touristic places like on the beach, on the border with the States, here in San Miguel, being in the central part of Mexico, we have that knowledge and have worked with the different companies of escrow to give more security and guarantee to our buyers and sellers. So notaries, agents, offices, I mean, we really use that tool as a daily life. Another one question that our clients, foreigners, ask, Do I need to pay title search? I will say that only on very specific circumstances we could have a title insurance or a title search. But otherwise, since there are public records and the notary has to really look into the track, the history of the real estate property, where it was born, where it was assigned, its real folio number, all the history, everything that has been involved into that. I would say that not necessary to have a title search, only very specific, because that is part of the notary service, because the notary is liable for the transaction. So that's very important also to see, to check.
Yes, and so we about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Stewart Title, which is the largest title company in the world and is based in Houston, opened up in Mexico. And I think they thought, I thought they were going to do this unbelievable business, that this was just going to change Mexico because so many Americans were going to be more comfortable about buying and so on. And this really hasn't happened because the quality of the notary and all that, most people don't buy title insurance. And of course, I think probably in the U.S., most people would not buy title insurance except they are required to by the lenders. And since we don't really have many lenders here, most transactions are all cash. And so they choose not to buy the title insurance, but it is there. It costs roughly the same as it does in the U.S., and it does roughly the same as what it does in the U.S.
Exactly. And again, a real estate advisor must have that knowledge to point you on your needs, on your desires, and giving you advice, counseling. When I'm working with a buyer, this is what I always tell them. Whatever you are buying today, you are going to sell it later. We don't know when, and I want to be there. So let's prepare everything to have a great deal at the purchase, so your profit at the sale will be excellent. Preparing as an accountant, you want to do some fixing, additions, improvements into the property. There are ways to do that also that help you on taxes. Planning is the key. Not just buying out of your desires heart, but planning on the future. Having your inheritance for your children set up with a will. It can be in the same title, it can be an additional will, so any property that you buy from Tijuana to Cancun, it's covered in the future. That helps a lot, and I have seen it. So asking your agent all your doubts, it's a must. And we need to be prepared for all of that. So it's what we offer you.
Yes, and the cost of the will is generally very low, just a few $100s.
Yes.
So in theory, you can present your American will, and it can be accepted in Mexico, but it is so complicated and lengthy that you would be crazy not to pay the $300 and have your own Mexican will. And it is important, and we have had some cases where people got this wrong, like they went back to the U.S. and made a new will, and their will said, by this will I cancel all previous wills, which then canceled their Mexican will. So it's really important that you talk to somebody who knows this and who points out these kind of issues. Also, in regard to the escrows, the money in the escrow does not come to Mexico. It goes to New York City, usually Citibank, and then is distributed to the seller, who may take it in the United States or take it in Europe or take it in Mexico. But the money you put up to buy the house does not come to Mexico.
Exactly, because our real estate law specifies that all real estate transactions in taxes has to be done by a wire transfer or by a cashier's check. So it has to be explicit, specified in the title. So electronically, nowadays, technology helps us a lot. And even though if you are buying in dollars, it has to be recorded in pesos, in our local currency, Mexican currency. But by the time you are selling, also, not that you are selling in pesos, you can sell dollar by dollar, or even euros by euros, you can do that. Taxes will be calculated in Mexico because that's the origin of that income, the sale. But with a well prepared real estate advisor, you can have the strategy very well set up and prepared in that scenario, so you know since the beginning your tax consequences and being prepared instead of negotiating at the closing with the notary when he presents you your taxes. Oh my God, that's, I believe, the worst nightmare that an agent can have.
Yes, yes, for sure. And also, I'm correct, am I not, that it is legal and legally enforcing for us to have a title that involves dollars or euros or British pounds or whatever, and that will be enforced by the Mexican courts.
Yes, 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 it can be done. Remember that also in Mexico we have a monetary currency law, and it specifies in the Article 8, I believe, that it can be put in any foreign currency as long as it is specified that it will be in the Mexican currency, peso, will be recorded as well.
Yes. Okay.
So you need to have it in pesos, Mexican pesos, but you can pay it dollars, euros, it doesn't matter, and electronically anywhere. I'm still in doubt about Bitcoin, those digital
Yes,
currencies.
yes.
That will be another topic to explore.
Yes.
But it's very interesting what we can really help you owning a property in Mexico, in San Miguel.
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I thank you, Ben, for these questions, and I bet that there are going to be more and more. People can write you, send you the comments, and it will be my pleasure, up to my extent in my knowledge, to help you answering your doubts.
Yes.
And without any obligation, I mean, it's my pleasure to help you have the best decision in buying property, because by the time you want to sell, I want us to be there helping.
Yes.
As well.
And I think you can see from this conversation that agents in Mexico do a broader range of things and do more things than the same agent does in the United States. And we really encourage you to take advantage of contacting us to answer some of these questions to your benefit, and to do it before the closing, because it can make for a tense morning if you don't mention it until 10:30.